Hello, this is Mr. Grant. This year I'll be serving as your Black History Month chair. For those of you who may or may not know, February is the time that we celebrate Black history. Black History Month was actually started in 1920 by Carter G. Woodson and other Black scholars. It began as Negro Heritage Week. The purpose was to commemorate the accomplishments and the heritage of those of the African diaspora, meaning those Black histories that are around the world in every country and every continent. Black History Month has been observed by our nation since its bicentennial in 1976. At DSST Cole, we will be joining our nation in celebrating Black History Month. We also want to let you know that we value the diversity of our students and our families in the community that we serve. We recognize that Black lives matter just as much as the lives of every other student within our community. The national theme this year is the Black Fight for Liberty and Education. Black History Month fact of the day will actually cover a person or a civilization or a time era. Every single morning, your teachers will have a PowerPoint slide with a picture of that person or time era for you to be able to visualize as you come into the room, and we'll also have a video and questions. Those questions will actually help you be prepared for our closing ceremony at the end of February, which will be a big game show called the Soul Bowl. So make sure you're watching the questions and taking in the questions, so that way you'll be able to participate in the Soul Bowl. Every grade level will be represented. It will be a Jeopardy style game. Each grade level will get to compete to see who remembers the most Black History Month facts, and they will win a prize and, of course, grade level rep. Every Friday during incentive recess, you'll have an option to be able to go to room 113 and watch various videos on Black history, such as Ruby Bridges and other videos that highlight the many different times and era of Black history. Also, attention all students with talent. During our closing ceremonies, we will have many different opportunities for you to express your talent via an oratorical read, or if you like to sing, or if you like to dance, please let your teachers know so that way they can get you in contact with me, and we get you ready to go to perform during the closing ceremonies of Black History Month. All in all, we want to make sure that you guys are understanding and seeing a wide variety of history and being able to access the world. Peace out, brothers and sisters.
Africa, where the human race began. Nearly 1 billion people live here. And it's a continent with an incredible diversity of communities and cultures. Yet we know less of its history than almost anywhere else on Earth. But that's beginning to change. In the last few decades, researchers and archaeologists have begun to uncover a range of histories as impressive and extraordinary as anywhere else on Earth. It's a history which has been neglected for years, and it's largely without written records. But it is preserved for us in the gold and statues, in the culture, art, and legends of the people. My name is Gus Casely Hayford. Over many years, I've studied the history and culture of Africa. As an art historian, I'm used to drawing stories from mute objects from the past. I'm going to discover the history and find out what really happened to the lost kingdoms of Africa.
Ancient Egypt, land of great pyramids, stunning artwork, commanding pharaohs, and powerful empires. Egypt, above all ancient civilizations, has captured our fancy with its spectacular iconography and cultural charisma. But even as the ancient Egyptians proclaimed their power to the world, they buried a shocking secret about their reign. They erased from history the story of a subordinate kingdom from the south that rose up, overthrew their masters, and ruled as pharaohs of Egypt themselves. These conquerors were the Kushites, a civilization of builders, gold workers, and warriors from what is now Sudan.
The fact that Kush was able to conquer Egypt is really a David and Goliath story.
Yet today, Kushites have been all but forgotten. Why? Because of the color of their skin. These were dark-skinned Africans of the Black Pharaohs who brought Egypt to its knees. Reisner recovered troves of gold jewelry and stunning artifacts. Intricate masterpieces buried with the Kushite kings to enrich them in the afterlife.
As an archaeologist, your dreams are often quite vivid about what you can find in a place. And so obviously these kings' burials were once extremely rich with gold and silver objects and finely crafted, beautiful expressions of their religious sentiments as well as their status and prestige. So we could imagine finding all of those things.
Nubia was a tempting target for the ambitious pharaohs. There were frequent raids and retaliations. Then, around 1500 BC, the records show us that the Egyptians invaded. Their target wasn't just Kerma. They continued another 180 miles along the Nile to a place called Jebel Barkal. It's a temple, apparently built by a Nubian ruler called Taharqa in around 700 BC. But what these images show is that Taharqa wasn't just a ruler of Nubia, he was also a pharaoh of Egypt. The conquered had become the conquerors. He was one of a whole dynasty of Nubian pharaohs, which ruled over the entire Nile Valley under the auspices of our moon.
And Taharqa wearing a crown with two cobras, which means that he is the king of the two lands.
Wow, astonishing.
Yeah.
Because usually these things are so ambiguous and that you have to make a bit of a leap of faith with history or archaeology.
Yeah.
This is absolutely categorical. And suddenly I'm seeing that snake again. These are black pharaohs, Nubians, part of that lost kingdom of Nubia. But they didn't just rule over Nubia, they also ruled over Egypt as one continuous kingdom.
In Egyptian mythology, cobras have a powerful connection to kingship. Goddesses take the shape of a cobra to protect the king. That's why they appear on the crowns of pharaohs, including King Tut's.
It was often a relationship based on trade. Evidence from Egyptian tombs shows depictions of people from the Sudan bringing tribute, as it's always characterized, into Egypt. So items like leopard skins, monkeys, precious stones.
Because of its location on the Nile, Kerma grew into a thriving trade hub between sub-Saharan Africa and Egypt, funneling ebony, ivory, and exotic animals north. But it was gold that fueled the Kush's rise to power. They mined it from the Nile River Valley and sold it to Egypt. The Egyptians had an insatiable appetite for jewelry. Not to mention the gold leaf coffins and funerary masks made famous by King Tut.
Kush was traditionally known to the Egyptian as the land of gold. So most of the gold of the Egyptian state came from Nubia, and mostly came from this area and also from the eastern desert to the east of Kerma.
The Egyptians also documented the Kushites' skill as archers, calling them the bow people and employing them as mercenaries. And Egyptian instructions on fighting record the Kushites' prowess as wrestlers. A tradition that still thrives in Sudan today. His forces moved north on the Nile to Thebes. He told his army, "String the bow and let loose the arrow. Let the people of the Northland taste my fingers." It wasn't long before Pianki's enemies begged for peace. "Be merciful," cried one Libyan king. "I cannot see your face for shame. I cannot stand before your flame. I tremble at your strength."
The fact that Kush was able to conquer Egypt is really a David and Goliath story.
Pianki and his successors became Egypt's 25th dynasty. They controlled the wealth of an area stretching from modern-day Khartoum to the Mediterranean, becoming rivals of mighty Assyria and Greece. Pianki credited Amun for his success. Pianki ruled from Kush for about a dozen years before handing the crown over to his younger brother, Shabaka. Shabaka moved north to take over the Egyptian capital Memphis and settle unrest in the Nile Delta. He launched a renaissance of building on a scale not seen since Egypt's New Kingdom heyday. Shabaka and his brother before him earned reputations as strong, merciful leaders.
They were famous for their piety and their magnanimity. For example, they didn't slaughter their prisoners, they forgave them. They put them to work digging canals. These are completely uncharacteristic features of ancient kings.
Pianki and Shabaka's triumphant reigns paved the way for Pharaoh Taharka, who battled Egypt's foes far beyond the empire's borders. Around 700 BC, he even saved Jerusalem and King Solomon's temple from an assault by the Assyrians. For this act, recorded in the Old Testament, Hebrew historians hail Taharka as a savior of the people. But the Assyrians would have their revenge. They dogged Taharka's reign with invasions and ultimately rolled his borders all the way back to Thebes.
These hieroglyphs show how Taharka celebrated his joint Nubian-Egyptian kingdom in the sanctuary of this temple. On the one side, he depicted the Nubian gods,
On the other wall here.
with the Egyptian deities on the other. This black African civilization held sway from the Upper Nile all the way to the Lebanon for over a century. These statues, discovered only a few years ago, give us a portrait of the Nubian pharaohs in all of their self-confidence. These people ruled the whole area from here down in the Nubian territory right the way up into Egypt. And you can tell that by looking at their headdress. These two snakes, one for Nubia, one for Egypt. And you can tell how threatening they were to the Egyptians because they've all at some point had their heads knocked off. Just look at them.
I, Taharqa, the good god, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, who lives forever. I have destroyed the Bedouin of Asia, and I have cut down the desert dwellers of Libya. Though Taharqa was an unrepentant warrior, by the time he died, he had very little of Egypt left under his control. His successors didn't seem to notice and persisted in declaring they were the pharaohs of both nations. In 593 BC, fed up with their bombastic proclamations, Egyptian pharaoh Psamtik II led an army into Kush. Psamtik also had an old score to settle. Years before, a Kushite pharaoh had executed his great-grandfather. Psamtik's goal? To erase the 25th dynasty from history by destroying every statue his army could find and chiseling Kush pharaonic names off every monument. In the ultimate insult to Kush, soldiers even chopped the sacred Egyptian cobra from Kushite crowns.
And though they were unable to keep their hold on Egypt, the Nubian kingdom survived for centuries afterwards. But now they had acquired some Egyptian habits. From this time onward, Nubian rulers would be buried in pyramids like the pharaohs of old. There are more pyramids in Sudan than in Egypt. But this wasn't simple imitation. It had been centuries since Egyptian rulers used pyramids, and these pyramids are of a very different shape. This was the Nubians celebrating their own glory. Today, the desert here is littered with the remains of pyramids and temples. The society that built them flourished between 700 BC and 400 AD. The rebirth of the Nubian kingdom at Meroe, still green and lush back then, is marked by countless palaces and temples. There seems to be an inheritance expressed in traditions about cattle, about wrestling, and in legends about an ancient homeland. The most important thing is the weight of evidence we now have the existence of Nubia as a remarkable, long-lasting, and indigenous kingdom. Nubia wasn't a barbarian wasteland on the fringes of civilization, as the Egyptians and Romans would have us believe. It was a real power, which developed independently and rivaled the pharaohs, a place with a distinctive way of life. In the end, it became a victim of climate change. But I think that Nubian ideas of power, wealth, and kingship continue to resonate in modern Africa.